Hello, sunshine. I'm ALEXI LALAS, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This week, we'll be talking about the new Hoppe. Oh, yeah. MLS Labor negotiations, David Beckham and friends, Freddy Adu, Pochettino, Erling Haaland, Pulisic, super clubs, submarines, and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox Soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you doing on this January 12th, Tuesday of the year 2021? As you all know by now, we have delayed this broadcast for a day. Apologies, couldn't be helped. We try to be as regular as possible, but sometimes technical problems get in the way and scheduling gets in the way. So we're coming to you a day late. Apologies. Mosse, how are you?
I am doing well, and I am to blame for the delay. You and I had a meeting on Monday morning at the time where we would normally be taping the podcast, and I made a big issue of the fact that we had to move the podcast taping to Tuesday. And then as it turns out, the meeting we had ended much sooner than we expected, and we probably could have taped at more or less the regular time. So that is on me. I apologize to the folks out there.
So that you are deprived of your regularly scheduled State of the Union, as you just heard, the responsibility is being taken by David Mosse. Wonderful, Mosse. That's very, very nice of you. But you know, we trudge on. Over the weekend or anything over the past week, Mosse, did you watch anything or listen to anything interesting? I did, and I'll tell you that in a second. But I want to hear you first.
A couple of things. I binged Tehran, which is a show. I'm a big fan of Fauda, and Tehran is done by the same people. This one is focusing on the Israeli-Iranian conflict. Very good. And then also I started The Mandalorian, which, I had reached a point where I was kind of over the Star Wars content. I felt like I had outgrown Star Wars, and I was a bit turned off by the sheer volume of Star Wars content being thrown our way. But there's been so much buzz about this show. It's almost reached this Game of Thrones level cultural phenomenon with Baby Yoda and whatnot. And I felt left out of conversations. And so I decided I should check this show out. And so I finished the first season last night, 8 episodes. I have 8 more to go. Season 2, which I've heard is the better one of the 2 seasons. So, and I'm already liking it. So if season 2 is even better than season 1, I think I'm in for an enjoyable ride here the next few days. Interesting.
Well, I have children, and so I did break my cardinal rule of not watching anything unless I'm able to binge it from start to finish. So I've been watching The Mandalorian. You're absolutely right in that the second season, I think, is better. So at least it's growing in that direction, which is a good thing. And there are a lot of people that I think are Star Wars out and just trying to keep track of the timeline when it comes to Star Wars, because even in the regular movies, it jumped all over the place. And then there were ones that were going back before. There were ones that were going in between movies, and then these spin-offs types of things. I didn't think I was going to enjoy it as much as I have. So yeah, I think that would definitely be a positive thing. What was the other thing you mentioned?
Tehran.
And that's on what platform out there, Mosse?
Apple TV.
Apple TV. And and you give it a thumbs up or?
Yeah, thumbs up. Yeah.
Okay. I watched, and this is a documentary that's been on Netflix for a while, and it's one of those where I just kind of glossed over it and passed over it and just never really hit me. And then the other day I was like, I'll give it a go. Operation Odessa, about, and it's not it doesn't have episodes. It just has an hour and a half of an actual documentary, and it documents this crazy group of dealers, shall we say? When I say dealers, dealers in drugs and ultimately it documents their attempt to procure a submarine from the Russian military a couple decades ago They were working out of Miami, and they were working with the cartel, the Colombian cartel, and Pablo Escobar. And it's just this fascinating and crazy saga of them trying to actually buy a used submarine from the Russian army so that they could then transport this to Colombia, that they could load it up with drugs, and they could transport a large amount of drugs, obviously without being seen. And it goes through all the craziness and these characters in this, and it's almost as if they are out of central casting, but they are real, and it's just a really interesting and entertaining and fascinating and crazy story. So I really enjoyed that. The other thing is, I mentioned I have kids, so I'm also in the middle of Cobra Kai. Mosse, have you seen this? I think we talked about this before.
I don't watch it, but I'm
okay.
Aware.
So it's for me, it's jumped the shark in that I think that this season is not even close to as good as the previous season. I think it's become cartoonish, and I don't think that it is headed in the right direction. It's almost as if they just should have done one season and that would have sufficed. They have gone back to that well, and I don't think that it is as deep and as plentiful as they thought it was going to be. Although it was fun to see the great Elizabeth Shue, who while I love her, it was a very strange type of cameo and appearance for her. And I'm not going to spoil it for anybody that is or isn't watching, but I'll continue to watch it just because my kids kind of dig it. All right, anything else, Mosse, before we light this candle?
That's it.
All right, let's do it then. We're going to jump right in, and we're going to start off with our good friend David Beckham in the news. We know that the MLS team that exists in Miami, when I say Miami, I mean Fort Lauderdale, is called Inter Miami, at least for now, okay? But really what this team is called is David Beckham's Inter Miami. This is an Inter Miami team that is in search of a new coach for this year. Last year was not a complete failure, but I would say, and I think I'm fair to say, that it did not live up to the expectations that those of us, certainly from the outside and probably from the inside, had of this club finally coming to fruition. And it was a strange year. I understand that. But we'll come to find out, Mosse, what's happening down there? What's the latest going on?
Well, they fired Diego Alonso.
Right.
And the odds-on favorite to take over as their next head coach is Phil Neville. Former teammate of David Beckham at Manchester United, former England women's national team coach. And this has generated a very negative reaction because Phil Neville, his coaching resume is pretty flimsy, and this reeks of Beckham just hooking up one of his buddies with a job. And this after Beckham made a big show, the fact that he was going to be more involved and take things more seriously. And make no mistake, this is him putting his stamp on the franchise because this hire would be all him. And if it doesn't work out, he's going to get blamed. And listen, if it is Phil Neville, he deserves a fair chance. Maybe he'll prove everybody wrong, but the optics here are bad. It just, everybody is sort of interpreting this as David Beckham just, again, hooking up one of his buddies with a job that the guy doesn't really deserve. So are you on that page, or do you think people are being unfair towards Phil Neville? What is your take on all this?
Life isn't fair and soccer isn't fair. Everybody has different advantages and different opportunities, and you use them when you have them in order to push yourself into those opportunities and push yourself ahead. I get that. What's the take as to why he is not deserving? This is a coach who has coached a team to a semifinal of a World Cup, if I'm not mistaken, Mosse?
Correct.
Okay, so it's just that his resume is not as long as others, and is it? Because he wouldn't be the first coach to be given an opportunity that didn't have a long resume and didn't have, in this case, a long resume when it comes to coaching the men's game. He's been the coach in the women's game. But if I'm led to believe that coaching is coaching, then it really doesn't matter where he was coaching. This is a guy who's been to the semifinals of the World Cup. Now that's the international game, and there certainly would be questions as to his ability on an international level, which you know is a very different type of coaching to the day in and day out, and for a league that we know is very, very unique and different and takes time to understand and adjust to all the complexities and the restrictions and the obstacles that don't necessarily exist in other places. I am willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, but it doesn't matter whether it was him or anybody else. The fact remains that you have to come in and you have to hit the ground running, and that this team has to be better than it was last year. And to your point, Mosse, David Beckham has made very, very clear that he is taking over. Now, where he was before, I don't know, but this is on David Beckham. Even if you believe it wasn't before, it's certainly on him right now. That he has a relationship and a friendship should come as no surprise to anybody. That happens all the time and will continue to happen in terms of those relationships that supersede what people might think is fair or what people deserve. But ultimately, he's going to be held, and maybe even more so than somebody else who wasn't a friend of David, a friend of the FOD, a FOD, a friend of David than somebody else. But look, this is a team that is in dire need of leadership and in dire need of very, very quick fix in order to be competitive and to live up to the expectations that many of us have, and I think that they have internally.
Yeah, I will say on the England women's front, it's worth pointing out they did also reach the semifinals in 2015 with a different manager. And from what I read, the general feeling is that the England program actually stagnated under Phil Neville. So yes, he does have a World Cup semifinal on his resume, but the general feeling there is he didn't do all that great a job as the England women's coach. So if that's like the big thing that you would bring up as a positive on his resume, even that people are poking holes into, and there's nothing much beyond that. So yeah, I mean, like I said, the conventional wisdom here is that this is a highly questionable hire if it goes this way. So we'll see. Like I said, he does deserve a fair chance, and maybe he'll prove everybody wrong.
Well, I do have some experience with Mr. Beckham over the years, and for those of you that are young or just unaware, I worked with David many years ago with the Los Angeles Galaxy. He as a player at the time, and I was the president and general manager at the time. And his influence, even at that time, as a player, was undeniable. And it can be helpful, and it can be a hindrance, depending on how it goes. Now he's in a little different capacity now. A much different capacity now as the owner and as one of the leaders, as opposed to a player. But what David Beckham wants, David Beckham usually gets. At times, as I said, that can be to the detriment of what a team is trying to do. But at times, he can also do things that bring in incredible value. I'm reminded that today, 14 years ago today, David Beckham signed with the Galaxy. It seems like yesterday, and it also seems like 100 years ago when I think about it. But you know, David Beckham, and when I say David Beckham, yes, there's the individual, but there's also the brand and the machine that is David Beckham. And negotiating and navigating that machine took up a lot of our time back then. And, you know, he's one of the most famous people in the world. And so it's obvious that he is going to have an impact and demanded to have an impact and demanded to have a say on how things were going along. And if I look back, I think at times he was given too much of a say and ability to influence things that were going on. But you know, that's hindsight. And now, as I said, in his current capacity, you want him there influencing. It's just in this particular hire, it is kind of a head scratcher, because I still think, Mosse, and I don't know if you agree with me, I still think that this is a job that there are a lot of coaches out there that would want.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
Miami, you get to move to Miami it's still a growing type of team right now. I don't want Miami to be in this limbo and then in this continual cycle of what we've seen from Orlando, okay, in the way that they came on. I don't think Miami can afford to do it, and I don't think MLS can afford to have that happen. So you better be damn sure that Neville is the right person to hire, because if a year from now we're sitting around and we're saying, boy, it took him forever to get up to speed and understand, and he was incredibly frustrated by the different machinations that exist when it comes to MLS, and the team didn't do as well, or they didn't make the playoffs, or they're still struggling, or there's all sorts of drama that's going on. You and others, I think, will point, and rightfully so, and say, well, you hired somebody who didn't have that type of resume, when it's not about money. And I also don't think it's about the swath of quality that would be afforded you for that position. And you chose to hire one of your friends. Fine, fair enough, but it better go well, or else not just David Beckham, but the brand of Beckham is going to suffer once again.
And one more note before we get to the labor dispute. You and I were in Columbus a few weeks ago to cover MLS Cup, which the Crew won. And we spent a lot of time around that Crew organization and came away very impressed. You could tell that they know what they're doing. And they have had a fantastic offseason, signing both Bradley Wright Phillips and Kevin Molino. You add those two to that mix with Zardes and Zelarayan and Nagby. That team all of a sudden is absolutely loaded, huh?
Oh my goodness. I mean, when the Bradley Wright Phillips one, yeah, I mean, I think people are, that one was interesting, and I think they'll find a way to use him because they'll be playing a lot of games. But the Molino one, I think that was a wow type of moment. This is an all-star player. This is a player that can be a game changer. This is a player that comes in, and despite the talent that Columbus already has, this is a player that is going to not just fight, but I think if you're Caleb, you're looking and saying, I can start him right now, even over others that won MLS Cup and have been there on a continual basis. That's what you want. That's cooking. So in a league where we often look at how when you are unsuccessful or when you do fail, you are given opportunities to quickly turn it around. This is the rich or the successful just get that much more rich and successful in terms of this. Wonderful signings. And it happens in a league where we also know that when you are really good, because of the structure, you are oftentimes made to make changes or release players or compensate for too much on your salary cap. So Tim Bezbatchenko and the leadership over there has done a really good job of managing this cap and making sure that they don't rest on their laurels. So yeah, absolutely, Mosse. I completely agree. Those are two very, very interesting, and I think, at least from the initial way that I view it, incredibly positive types of signings. What else, Mosse?
But so Columbus looking very strong for the 2021 season. However, there is a question as to when the 2021 Major League Soccer season will begin. We're once again dealing with a labor dispute brought on by the league invoking this force majeure. Do we need to explain to people all of that stuff, or can we get right?
No, I mean, look, labor disputes, I think everybody understands them. I don't want to get too much into the weeds. The MLS players, like players in most professional leagues, have an association, have a what amounts to a union that negotiates on their behalf collectively. And there are contracts that are signed over terms. You mentioned the force majeure. We've gone through a year like no other, and this act of God type of clause certainly it can be argued will apply. The interesting thing that has happened is that as they go through this next month, and this next month is going to be taken to try to figure out what this contractually is going to look like for the players. And this is like the third time over the last year and a half that they've gone through this type of thing. The league very publicly a few days ago came out, a league in MLS, and said, this is what we are offering. And their offer was this. They want to extend the current CBA an additional couple of years, okay? And in exchange for doing that, they want to guarantee that the players will continue to get 100% of their salary in 2021. Keep in mind that the players took, I think, a 5% decrease last year, and that in and of itself was actually pretty good compared to a lot of other people in the world that either were fired, were furloughed, or took much bigger types of pay cuts. And so now if you're a player, you are looking at the situation saying, all right, what's the trade-off? I increase the current CBA by a couple of years, okay, which means that the leverage that I may have from having it run out will be kicked down the road. But on the other side, I'm going to guarantee that in 2021, which we don't know what this year is going to ultimately look like, I'm going to guarantee that I'm going to be paid. Now, while we talk about, millionaire types of players and millionaire and million type of contracts, the reality is that for the majority of players, they are not making those millions, and they are living, for the most part, paycheck to paycheck, and they need those paychecks, and they are living in the here and now. They're not going to go on to incredible levels of fame and wealth and success, and they're probably only going to play a few years. And so they're not thinking about years down the line. They're thinking about right now, and what can I do to make myself and to protect myself and to protect my family? And that, I think, was a very, I'll use the word sly, but it wasn't nefarious or anything by the league. I think they really looked and said, this is something where we will give what we know is the majority of players the ability to sustain and to guarantee something now. And in return, we're going to get those extra 2 years that, and not to get too deep into the weeds, but it helps them from a television broadcast rights type of standpoint going forward, which are going to come up. But it does take away some of that leverage that the ending of that CBA would have given them at a different time. Did I explain that correctly, Mosse? I know you understood it, but do you think the people that are listening and watching recognize and understand this?
No, I do. And just to add a few more numbers here. So MLS receives $90 million in television money, which is actually much less than other sports leagues in the United States and other of the top soccer leagues around the world. So they rely more on match day revenue. So they obviously took a massive hit in 2020 with all the empty stadiums. MLS calculated that they lost $1 billion. And now in 2021, it's looking like it could be an equally difficult year. Who knows when fans are going to be allowed in large numbers back in stadiums. So yeah, they're trying to protect themselves against that and sort of kick the can down the road even more in terms of when players are going to get some of the benefits from the agreement in terms of increased compensation and a greater percentage of the television revenue. The interesting thing is it's been suggested, well, why not add more expansion teams? And then you can collect that expansion fee and that'll help, bring some much needed money in. And MLS said, no, we're not going to deviate from what our plans were expansion wise. And we're not going to do anything that we wouldn't have otherwise done and sort of fast track a team that we weren't planning on bringing in anytime soon. So that's interesting that even the NBA, Adam Silver has talked about the NBA possibly doing that and adding expansion franchises so they can collect the expansion fee. And that can help with, some of the financial pain. The other thing too, is that the players, it's interesting. They don't want this deal extended until 2027 because they think once life returns to quote unquote normal, MLS is going to continue on the ascendancy that it had been for numerous years. And so they want another crack at being able to negotiate a new deal come 2026 with that World Cup right around the corner. And they think they can really cash in then. So they don't want to put that off by 2 years because they think they're going to be in a really strong position come 2026 to ask for more money. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, but you're going to have to rely on the altruism and the goodness of people thinking outside of themselves and thinking for the future. Because if I'm a player and I know, look, I'm probably only going to be here for a couple more years, I'm going to make sure that I guarantee that I'm going to get as much money as I possibly can. You mentioned the expansion. The way that MLS is looking at expansion. I thought that was important. I thought that was interesting. You got to make sure that the existing teams that you have, and some of them very new. We know that Austin's coming in as an expansion team next year. You got to make sure that whatever you have right now is as robust and healthy as possible going forward. And I think that that's where that comes from, because to your point, it would be, I guess, easy to just say, all right, we'll go add a few more expansion teams and boom, there you got your, right now, the way we're looking at it right now, if you're into the 300s and 400s, a couple more expansion teams and you've recouped a lot of that money. But I think they also recognize that long-term is important and that we will come out of this at some point. And the viability, and as I said, the health of the individual teams, and whether it's just the teams on the field, the infrastructure, the ownership, the relationship to the market, the relevance, all of the things that we talk about, there's plenty of problems to fix in Major League Soccer right now. And so I think that was the recognition that while it might be easy, now is not and because of the time, now is not the time to do something like that. And I think that shows that shows intelligence. I also think that it shows faith that this is going to be something that is going to last. And to your point, that faith, I think, is being seen by both sides, that this is still, it's not too big to fail, but this is certainly not a startup anymore. And this is certainly not the early days when, back in the 1900s, when I was running around and jumping on the field, where we said, well, we may or may not be in business come next year or even next month. The infrastructure, the level of investment, the vision, the sheer numbers means that this is something that people are in for the long haul, and they don't want to do things now that might hurt that long-term type of success and viability. What else, Mosse?
And one more MLS related item. I've been chomping at the bit to talk about Grant Wahl's Freddy Adu podcast, which both you and I listened to. I really enjoyed it. By the way, I also enjoyed the podcast documentary that Grant did a while back on the 1991 Women's World Cup. Mm-hmm. But the one he did recently was on Freddy Adu, a 7-part documentary. The last episode aired last week. And yeah, I wanted to get your thoughts on it, because Grant's thesis is that all the media hype and all the expectations that were put on Freddy Adu at such a young age contributed to his downfall. And he cites as one of the quintessential examples of that. He told the story in the documentary that he's sitting in a hotel room with Freddy when Freddy was 14, 15 years old. And they turn on ESPN and they hear you on there as an analyst saying that the only way Freddy Adu can justify all the hype is if he leads the U.S. to a World Cup title. And Grant said that he looked at Freddy and Freddy was just kind of shaking his head at that. And so I was wondering, do you want to take this opportunity to apologize to Freddy Adu for putting all that pressure on him and thus contributing to his career going the way it went?
Hell no. No. As I said in the podcast, and look, I echo all of your comments. I think Grant does a great job of finding these stories and making them not only interesting, but interesting even if you weren't around. I was knee deep in a lot of this stuff, but I think he does a really good job. It's professional, it's interesting, and it's entertaining. So definitely check it out. No, I'm not apologizing, it's not a bone to pick, because it's just my opinion. I thought that Grant went out of his way and bent over backwards to not necessarily to apologize, but to frame those of us, whether it's in the media or agents or friends or the league leadership when it comes to MLS, as responsible for what ultimately happened to Freddie. As I said in the podcast, do not cry for Freddy Adu. Freddy Adu was given opportunities, the likes of which 99.999% of the players out there have never and will never see. Freddy Adu is still playing because of that hype. Now, the quote that you say in that was, and I remember it because of the level of hype and the level of scrutiny and the level of attention that was given to him. I knew at the moment that there's no chance that he could possibly live up to it unless he does something like that. And this was much more from an American type of perspective. And the question will always be, would Freddy Adu be a different player, or would that trajectory have changed had he gone to La Masia? I mean, there's young phenoms all the time that go to different places. This was unique in that his platform and his introduction to everybody was through MLS, and MLS used it. But no, I'm not. I don't think that we have anything to apologize for. Every country and culture pumps up its young players. Some of them meet those expectations. Some of them even surpass those expectations. But not all of them. Not all of them. All of them do. And as I said, it afforded him a life and a lifestyle. And he's very honest in the podcast about the opportunities that he was given and how ultimately it changed his life. And that's what I actually admire and respect and love about Freddie, is that he doesn't come across in any way in this podcast as bitter or angry. As a matter of fact, I think he is in a certain way grateful for everything that he got. Could different decisions have been made along the way? Yeah, of course. Was everything absolutely perfect? No, but in no way. Well, I'm not apologizing for whether saying that or anything else that we did. This was a young player, very, very young, historically young, that burst on the scene and was hyped up in the way that we do many, many young athletes out there. And as I said, some of them make it and some of them don't. And I would actually submit to you that while Freddy Adu certainly didn't win a World Cup with the men's team, and certainly you could look at as he failed, I don't think that he failed. I mean, he's had a long career. He's played for many, many years at different levels, and certainly not at what you consider the highest level. But he's been a professional since he was in his mid-teens, and he continues to play professionally and to be given opportunities out there. And there's a lot of players out there that weren't given those opportunities that would love to have had Freddy Adu's career.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about this. We could do a whole podcast on it, but I've always thought about Freddy Adu's career, and I'm glad that the podcast, Grant, did kind of reaffirm this, that Benfica was the fork in the road, because up to that point, he was doing fine. Maybe not according to these ridiculous expectations that were put on him, but by any normal metric of a hot, young, up-and-coming prospect. At 18 years of age, he had starred in an under-17 and an under-20 World Cup. He had already gotten caps for the senior team, and he had won an MLS Cup with DC and signed with Benfica and had a very credible first season there. I think Grant said he scored 5 goals in 20-something games for a very dysfunctional Benfica team that changed managers multiple times that season. And Freddie admits this. He should have just stayed at Benfica. And by the way, the media too, they took that line Freddie said about how he outperformed Di Maria that season. And there was this headline splash all over the world of Freddie Adu saying, I was better than Di Maria. And I thought it was very unfairly portrayed just to try to get clicks and very taken out of context of what Freddie was talking about. But nevertheless, I mean, Freddie talks about it, how leaving Benfica when he did and going on loan to Monaco, that was the beginning of the end. And I always say, there are exceptions to this, but generally speaking, I don't like young players going on loan, because you're going to a club that has nothing invested in your long-term development. And unless you're going to help them win games in the short term, they're not going to play you, because why are they going to waste time developing you for someone else? And so he just got caught in this mix of getting loaned out constantly and not getting the playing time that he needed, and sort of lost his way there. But I do wonder if he had stayed at Benfica. So, it's a shame.
Yeah. I mean, so part of the podcast is going back and looking at what if he had done this? What if he had done this? I mean, so if MLS had said, no, that's not something we're interested, no matter how good he is, this isn't something that we are going to do. And so he had continued on, he would have gone through high school, right? Probably. And continued on, who knows, maybe he had gone the college path or something like that. Would he? Well, he wouldn't be the Freddy Adu that we know right now. And the fact that, by the way, the name Freddy Adu is because of what happened and what he went through. So you might not even know the name Freddy Adu had he gone a different pathway. But would he be in a better place as a human being, as a person? And I know oftentimes I talk about and lament the fact that the college path is kind of going away. And you find out about Freddie and the family and the struggles that he had, and the opportunity that this gave not just him, but also gave him to make money for his family. And so that is something that I think about, is what would Freddy Adu be without soccer? So I mentioned that he would have gone to to college. He may or may not have gone to college with soccer going forward, but that is something that I think is legitimate to pose and to think about. And I think Freddie, and I don't know this, but I would think that he would say that with all the challenges and the ups and downs, ultimately soccer gave him so much more than he maybe would have been able to have in life. And I think he recognizes that. I think he is thankful for that. And like I said, I think Freddie actually comes back. And it should be noted that initially when Grant started this pod, Freddy Adu did not agree to participate. And as it went on and some different conversations, he eventually, so Freddie comes into the pod and starts to talk to Grant. And I think it's better with Freddy Adu there. As I said, I think he talks about the situation. Look, there's a little bit of Freddie when he talks about it that probably thinks I should have done this or I should have done that. But in general, I think Freddie comes off as appreciative of everything, despite all the trials and tribulations that he may have had, either in front of the camera and in public or privately.
Yeah, I mean, he was just in too much of a rush in those early years. It reminded me a little bit of the Nicholas Anelka documentary on Netflix. I think Anelka suffered from the same thing. I mean, at 14 years of age, you're a contributing player on a team that won MLS Cup, and yet you have Freddie after that first season saying, well, believe me, I'm not going to be coming off the bench next year. Things are going to change. Like, I don't know, at 14 years of age, should you be bristling at coming off the bench for a professional team? But, it's interesting. Does the name Drew Henson mean anything to you?
No.
Drew Henson was this two-sport high school star in the state of Michigan in the late 90s. He was a great baseball prospect and a great football prospect. And he ended up getting drafted by the New York Yankees and committing to play college football at Michigan. He actually battled Tom Brady for the starting job at Michigan. And, he knew that eventually he was going to have to pick one sport over the other. And it was framed back then as if he was a can't miss in either sport. It was a question of whether he was going to be John Elway or Alex Rodriguez. And he ended up choosing baseball, but was a flop with the Yankees, and then bailed on his baseball career and got drafted by the Dallas Cowboys in the NFL, and then was a flop in the NFL. So he's often held up as like the biggest flop ever because he managed to be a flop in two different sports. But I heard an interview with him recently where he pushed back on the notion that he's some sort of failure. And he was equally circumspect about it the way Freddie was, talking about, hey, I made millions of dollars. I'm financially secure. I got some incredible experiences. I got to play for the New York Yankees at Yankee Stadium. I got to start at quarterback for Michigan, play against the Michigan, Ohio State games. I got to start NFL games. And so don't cry for me. I've had a great life. And so it actually, I thought about that a lot when I was listening to Freddie too, that people who we think, must be sitting around so bitter that their career didn't pan out like everybody hoped it would, do have this ability to have perspective and still feel good about how their lives turned out.
Yeah, I mean, I worry about the ones that didn't make a lot of money, that didn't get the fame, that aren't going to have the opportunities. Look, Freddie Adu is going to have opportunities even after he stops kicking a ball because he's Freddie Adu, and I worry about the ones that we promote, we hype, that then go on but don't have that type of opportunity and the things to fall back on. All right. Anyway, you should check it out.
I recommend it. Lots of Rob's going on there. Lots of Eric Winalda. Also, this past weekend, part one of the Tiger Woods HBO documentary aired. You have not watched it yet, right?
No, I haven't.
Next weekend, I believe part 2 airs. That's your homework assignment. I would like you to watch that because that's fascinating as well, and also ties into this whole Prodigy kind of theme. So we'll talk about that on next week's pod.
Okay, perfect. Anything else, Mosse?
That's it.
All right, we're going to take a little break here. When we come back, we're going to what are we going to do? We're going to take a spin around Europe and see what's going on over there. Don't go away. All right, we're back, and we're going to head over to Europe. And we debated as to whether we were burying the lead here when it comes to American soccer and American soccer players. Mosse, all right. Matthew Hoppe. I think that's how we're pronouncing it, right?
I believe so, but I'm not 100% sure, which speaks to how out of nowhere this came, because I was not exactly checking for this kid before.
All right, let the good folks out there that may not have heard what happened over the weekend in on what we're talking about here.
So Matthew Hoppe is a 19-year-old American center forward who scored 1 goal in 16 games for Schalke 2 and had yet to score in 5 first-team appearances. And lo and behold, this past weekend, he bagged a hat trick for the Royal Blues in their 4-0 win over Hoffenheim, a win that snapped their 30-match winless run in the Bundesliga, a drought dating back to January of 2020. They one more result, and they would have equaled the Bundesliga record for winless run, which was held by Tasmania Berlin, which was 31. So Schalke avoid equaling that mark. But it's really a remarkable story. He becomes the first American to score a hat trick in the Bundesliga and just the third American to score a hat trick in Europe's top 5 leagues. Dempsey got one for Fulham against Newcastle, and Christian Pulisic last season for Chelsea against Burnley. And yeah, I mean, this really came out of nowhere. So now we've come to find out we have yet another American to follow in high-level European soccer. So incredible, huh?
This says and informs so much about who we are as an American soccer playing culture. It was amazing, and it just has blown everybody's minds for different reasons. Okay, so first off, that a Schalke player scored in and of itself is amazing, okay? That Schalke won is amazing, and that it was all on the backs of a 19-year-old American that nobody really had heard of in the general population out there. It just makes it an incredible moment and an incredible story. What remains to be seen is this beautiful red, white, and blue anomaly, or is this the real thing? And the fact that we as a soccer playing nation and as the U.S. men's national team are desperate and are in dire need of somebody to actually score goals up top, because nobody has kind of grabbed the mantle from Josie Altidore, makes it that much more interesting and intriguing when it comes to this young player. This is a product of the American youth soccer development system that exists out there. Barcelona Academy out there in Rio Grande, and which has been around for a while. And this is a player that, from a U.S. national team perspective, is not somebody that has played, but it doesn't mean it's not that this isn't a player that is necessarily on people's radar. Part of the job, just because a player does or doesn't play for the national team, doesn't mean that the U.S. National team staff isn't tracking players and has them on radar. So it goes back to what I said. Is this the real thing? Is this the coming out party for a player that can go on and do these things on a continual basis? Or is this just a wonderful momentary type of story? Now, the way that he scored the goals was important. Wonderful timing, great composure in getting behind the defense and doing that kind of stuff. So that was great to see, but also to see the way that people attached their dominant type of feelings, both good and bad, when it comes to American soccer, and in particular to the American soccer youth development structure out there. It was amazing. As you know, how can this possibly happen? Did this player fall through the cracks? This is what's wrong with American soccer. But then there was the other part of it, is that this is simply a continuation and an affirmation of the fact that there is incredible talent that exists in the United States and that has existed in the United States. If you just give it opportunities and you give it platforms and you have the courage, and I'm talking about teams around the world, to say, yes, we want some of that talent. We are going to give that talent an opportunity. And my friends, the well of American soccer talent and young quality American soccer talent, it is not run dry in the least. It is still full. And so come dip your cups in it. There are there are more Matthew Hoppes out there, I guarantee you. And I will submit to you that I think that there are probably better players, much better players than Matthew Hoppe out there, if you just take the time to find them. What was your initial reaction on seeing this as it relates to American soccer, Mosse?
Yeah, I mean, we've reached the point now where even guys that we hadn't even heard of, that weren't even considered top prospects, are now doing great things in Europe. So the depth of talent, of young talent the U.S. has is just incredible. Now, as you mentioned, it's one game. I need to see a little bit more, but it is at a position, center forward, where the U.S. Has some question marks. So if this kid can go on any kind of run here, he would thrust himself in the conversation. I saw some people already putting him ahead of Josh Sargent in the pecking order, because Sargent hasn't had a performance like this in the Bundesliga yet. So we'll see. It is worth noting that this young man is from Yorba Linda, California, also the birthplace of Richard Nixon, the location of the Nixon Presidential Library, a place I've been to a couple of times that I greatly enjoy as a history buff. So yeah, it's a phenomenal story. I'm definitely going to keep checking for this kid.
It must be fun. It must be fun to be Matthew right now, and to kind of, this moment where he's on the cover of magazines now, and everybody's trying to find out about him. But it should be noted, and I talked a little bit about it, is that just because a player, and in this case it's Matthew Hoppe, hasn't been involved in the youth national team setup, first off, like I said, doesn't mean that he's not on the radar. And number two, most importantly, is that players develop at different speeds. And we just talked about Freddy Adu, who I don't think from a development standpoint, he got to a point where he stopped getting better, either just because of who he ultimately was, and he hit his ceiling, or the situation that he was in. And you have just from a physical perspective, players develop differently, and they grow, or they get stronger, they get weaker, they get faster, or they get slower as they continue to grow. So I'll never forget. And I was not involved in the youth national teams for the U.S. growing up. First time I came involved was with the Olympic teams, which I guess is kind of a youth national team, and that's under 23. But I'm talking about in my teens or anything. That wasn't something that I was part of. And there were a lot of players that were on that trajectory because they were on the national team, the youth national team, that never made it, never ultimately became part of that full national team. Now, there were some, like Mike Burns, for example, that was on, I think, almost every youth national team. So he was identified early, and he lived up to those expectations and continued on, matriculated from national team to national team, and kept going ultimately to the full national team. But it's interesting to see when that final full national team gets together, the very diverse and different types of pathways that players have taken to get there. And so, look, Matthew Hoppe might be the new Hoppe. Okay, he might be the answer to our goal scoring, and that he has taken a little time to come to our general attention, or that he has taken time to develop. That shouldn't be a surprise, because when you look at the final roster of national teams, it's rare that the majority have been there from the start and gone through that youth national team type of progress, just because of the strange way our bodies work, and the changes and the different ways that and the different speeds at which we develop.
And two other young Americans featured in the marquee game of the weekend in the Bundesliga, which was Leipzig, Dortmund. Both Tyler Adams and Jerry started, and actually mixed it up quite a bit in this game, which was interesting to see. Like it. But Haaland stole the show, 2 more goals. He's the fastest player to reach 25 career Bundesliga goals. He's got 25 in 25 games. Sancho also found the back of the net. Dortmund with a big win, 3-1. It thrust them back into the mix there at the top of the Bundesliga. Leipzig squandered a chance to overtake Bayern for first place. And we could talk about the Americans, but I do want to say something about Haaland.
No, let's talk about Haaland. I mean, look, I know we talk about the Americans, and it's great, they're playing, and that's wonderful. But I mean, look, I guess we can call him a kid, but I mean, I hope we're not putting too much pressure on him, Mosse. Are we okay? Is it okay?
Yeah,
I make sure. I don't want to, put too much hype and hurt him. And look, I'm being a little flip. I understand this difference between a 14-year-old and what's he, 19? How old's Haaland?
I will check on that. Perhaps
check on that, my friend.
Can help us out.
Anyway, let's talk about him, because he continues to score goals. And so my question right now is, number one, where does he go? And number two, what is that price tag right now? Because 20 years old, there you go. He's 20 years old. So what is the price for a 20-year-old goal scorer that is doing it at the highest level, that is doing it consistently, that is scoring different types of goals, that isn't your traditional number 9, in that he can post up and he does that fine, but he also has a speed and a touch and a creativity about him, Mosse, that tells me that he's something even better. You're getting even more. You're not getting a Lewandowski. You're not getting a Klose. You're not getting these types of stereotypical types of number 9s in him. You're getting something so much more. And so that should make his value even more. I mean, I don't know. What's he worth?
I mean, the sky's the limit for him. I mean, obviously any club would love to have him. And once we snap out of this sort of pandemic market and clubs are back to throwing crazy money around again. Yeah. I mean, 150 million euros, 200 million euros. I mean, we're looking at something like that. I mean, he showed in his first goal this weekend, it was Dortmund's second goal. He showed me a club I didn't know he had in his bag. I mean, those nifty moves when he dribbled past like 3 Leipzig defenders in the buildup to that goal. I didn't know he had that kind of technical ability in short spaces. So, I mean, every week he shows me something where, oh my God, this guy's even better than I thought. And, it is interesting watching him score goals against Leipzig, because remember, he was at Salzburg playing for Jesse Marsch. And so he was under that Red Bull umbrella, and they wanted to steer him towards Leipzig, which is what they've done with other players like Naby Keita, or even just this month with this Zobolai, this Hungarian playmaker who everybody wanted, and he's off to Leipzig. But they didn't have as much control of the situation because Haaland had negotiated this low buyout clause, which obviously any team that wanted him was going to be willing to pay. So it was going to be up to him to decide where he was going to go. And he was adamant that Dortmund was the best place for him. And so he went there. So Leipzig out of luck. And now they have to deal with him scoring goals against them. But yeah, as far as where he's going to go, I don't know about the where, but I can tell you the when is going to be whenever he feels ready to make that leap, because this kid's career has been so carefully managed by his father, who's a former Premier League player, Alf-Inge Haaland, and he doesn't seem to be in any rush. He could be at a super club by now, of course, right, but instead he chose to go to Salzburg first, and Salzburg to Dortmund. And so everything has been sort of carefully, planned out so that he's not like skipping steps here. And he's only going to make that leap to a sort of Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich sort of super club when he thinks it's the perfect time in his career to make that move. I could see him staying another year or two at Dortmund if he feels like that's in the best interest of his development. I don't think this kid is in any rush or antsy to like skip steps. He's totally comfortable moving at his pace. Where
do you rank him in the world? Best striker in the world? Can you make an argument for that?
Yeah, I mean, in the conversation, I think you got to put Lewandowski number 1, but then, yeah, top 5 for sure. Yeah, top 3 or 4, I would say. Yeah.
I mean, look, like you said, if he brings things that others don't have, first off, he can do the traditional things as well, if not better, and then he brings those other things. That's my goodness, look out. Yeah, we're talking 200 million or something like that. All right, well, we'll see where he ends up. Speaking of young players that are hyped up and may or may not live up to the hype as they go on, our friend Paul Pogba, right? Is he in the news?
Well, look, I'll bite here, but let me say this: our previous producer, Alex Dowd, during transfer market time, he had this annoying habit of treating everything the English media said as gospel and had no ability to distinguish between real rumors and fake rumors. And I hope our new producer, Jeff Hernandez, doesn't go down the same path. He put in the rundown that Pochettino said he wants Paul Pogba. Pochettino has not said he wants Paul Pogba, but the English media is reporting that Pogba is going to be a target of PSG. And yeah, I mean, Mino Raiola came out recently and said that Pogba wants to leave Manchester United this summer. United seem willing to acquiesce. MLS. His contract runs out in 2022 anyway. So if he's that unhappy, let's cash in this summer rather than risk losing him for free in a year. Supposedly the asking price is 75 million euros, which I think is a bit high for a Paul Pogba who's going to be 28 years old come this summer. So I don't know that anybody's going to pay that. But the three clubs that have been mentioned that maybe for the right price would talk themselves into it would be Real Madrid, because Zidane likes him, Juventus, because that's where he played before and did well, and then PSG, because he's French, he's buddies with Neymar and Mbappe. So we'll see. I mean, PSG do have bigger fish to fry this summer. They're perhaps going to try to get Messi. They got to figure out Mbappe's future. Plus, there's this assumption that money is no object for PSG, but actually they've been hit hard by the pandemic too and have some financial fair play considerations. So last couple windows, they haven't been throwing that much money around. And supposedly this window, they're looking to unload players. So we'll see. There's a lot of maybes here, but yeah, I mean, Pogba come this summer is probably going to be a player that's out there that people are talking about where he's going to end up.
Well, would you want him on your team?
Yeah, I am a Pogba defender. I'm a Pogba fan. I wouldn't pay like crazy money for him. I think he's been devalued, but for the right price, yeah, I think I wouldn't mind having.
So
Pogba.
They've asked 75. What's the right price? 50?
Yeah, I think I'd be looking at closer to 50.
50 million, whatever. All right, you got a Copa Lib update for us, right?
Yeah, listen, the podcast getting pushed today makes this a little bit of a tricky update for me because we're taping on a Tuesday. By the time you hear this on Wednesday, one of the semifinals will already have been played. And actually, depending on when you listen to this, both semifinals might have already been played. But just to get everybody caught up on where we are. So Palmeiras of Brazil have in the driver's seat. They had an amazing result last week. They won 3-0 away to River Plate. And now they come home looking to protect that 3-0 advantage. I will say, though, they raced out to a 3-0 lead early in the second half in Buenos Aires and had a man advantage for the last 30 minutes and didn't tack on to their lead. The second half substitute, Willian, missed a chance that Luis Aguilar could have scored. And if something crazy happens this week and Palmeiras go out, that Willian miss in the first leg will be the Ousmane Dembele against Liverpool moment of that tie. But like I say, barring a catastrophe, Palmeiras in great shape to get to the final, which would blow up the Boca River final everybody's hoping for. The other semifinals still wide open. Boca and Santos played to a 0-0 draw at La Bombonera. Santos had a stone cold penalty not given in the second half. Even after a VAR review, the Brazilian media was furious about it. But so it ends 0-0. So we go back to the Vila Belmiro in Brazil for that one. And I think slight advantage Boca, because I think 0-0 is an overrated result for an away team in a first leg. These two teams are very evenly matched. And the fact that a scoring draw now sends Boca to the final, another 0-0 draw would send it to penalties. So I think advantage Boca here. Santos are the team that's really under pressure to try to win this game. So we'll see. So that one is in the balance. Palmeiras in great shape. So that's where we are as far as the Copa Lib.
All right. Well, if you're listening to this a few days later, you will know whether we have we could still have anything, right? We could still have all Argentina, all Brazil, or one from each, right?
Correct.
Okay, let's finish this off here. So for those that listened to the episode last week, you will know that we talked and had takes about Christian Pulisic. And even at the time when I said in my infinite wisdom that Christian Pulisic is too good for this Chelsea team, Mosse immediately recognized that this was going to be something that was going to generate some heat and some blowback, as it did. And which is fine, which is great. I mean, we have opinions and we recognize that some people are going to agree, some people aren't going to disagree. And it's going to come from a place of human beings, and therefore their baggage and their bias is always going to be incorporated. And so the Chelsea folks were not happy that I had the temerity to even suggest that any player could possibly be too good for Chelsea. What they failed to understand is that I said that Christian Pulisic is too good for this Chelsea team. And certainly at the moment, this is not a classic or traditionally type of powerful Chelsea. Maybe in the future, but it certainly isn't right now. The other thing that people wanted to point out is that Christian Pulisic gets hurt a lot, something that you have heard us talk about and reference many, many times. That's a separate type of conversation. I'm not saying that it's not important and it's not part of being assessed as a player, but ultimately when Christian Pulisic is on the field, the things that he is doing, the way that he is playing, I still believe that he is too good, in that if you put him on a much better team, I think that the team would be better, whatever team that is, and that he would be better, and that he would have others that are thinking in the same way that he is, and that have the ability at this time to play in the same way that he is. So that's, and I don't think I was unclear about that last week, and I'm certainly not unclear about this week. That people disagree is part of the gig. That people vehemently disagree and call me names relative to an opinion I have about soccer is also part of the gig. So bring them on, but my opinion certainly hasn't changed in the least about how I see Christian Pulisic right now playing for this Chelsea team. Mosse, did you have anything to say about this? Well, because you were also included in this in the clip that we put out, although much of the ire was directed my way. But did you think at the time that it was such a crazy and controversial type of take?
The way you put it, it was very blunt. I will say, would it have killed all these newspapers around the world that reported on it? They alluded to you making the comments on the State of the Union podcast. They could have said which he co-hosts with David Mosse.
Listen, I know, buddy. Years, right? Part of what I want to do is I want to make sure that you get the credit that you deserve. I want to work on your brand in 2021, the Mosse brand. All right, I'm gonna do everything that I possibly can to get that out there.
And let me just sneak in one quick Premier League thought here. You made those Pulisic comments on the heels of Chelsea suffering a comprehensive defeat to Manchester City. City then went on and won away to United in the League Cup semis to set up a final with Tottenham. Pep against Mourinho there. City looked a bit stale early on this season. I even mentioned on the podcast, I thought maybe this was 1 year too many under Pep, but they have gotten their mojo back. Mm-hmm. They are back to their best. And, I've been talking to Liverpool superfan Keith Costigan about this, and he's very worried. He's been watching the last few City games with that same look that Mickey had watching those Clubber Lang fights in the opening montage of Rocky III. And unless Liverpool get their center back problem sorted, they could be in trouble here. In fact, I'm ready to say that I had been saying Liverpool all along, but I'm ready to say City are now the favorites to win the Premier League this season. I love the way they're playing. So
wow.
I would put that out there.
Wow. Do you want to backtrack or amend any of your thoughts when it comes to how Pulisic is playing in this version of Chelsea?
No. I mean, like I said, I didn't go as far as say he's too good for Chelsea, but I do think there have been some recent games, particularly that Arsenal one on Boxing Day, where the team overall struggled and he was able to rise above it and still have some good moments, and he was their best player. And so, yeah, you were left with this frustrating sense if you're a Pulisic fan of mine. He's not getting any help here. So I get where your statement was coming from. I wouldn't go as far as to say he's too good for Chelsea, but
I didn't say that, but that's not what I said. I said he's too good for this Chelsea team. Okay. Doesn't mean that he's too good to play for Chelsea, but the level of player that Christian Pulisic is, I want him playing for Chelsea. Okay. I want him playing for what I think of when I think of Chelsea. And that is not what this team is right now. Who knows? It might be in the future, but it's not right now. And so therefore, that's why I said it. Anyway, anything else, Mosse?
That's it.
All right, we're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, oh yeah, you know what, you love it, or you don't, but we're going to do it either way. It's time for Ask Alexi. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back, and it's time for Ask Alexi, that time in the pod when we pick a few questions, comments, concerns out there that people that have sent us our way using the hashtag Ask Alexi, or not. Doesn't matter. I mean, we'd appreciate it if you do, but it doesn't, just because you ask a question doesn't mean we're not going to use it just because you don't have the hashtag. But we do appreciate when you do use it. And so we've picked a few out this week that we are going to delve into. What do the people want to know this week, Mosse?
First up, Brooke Tunstall. Can a forward be considered effective and keep his job as a starter if he consistently plays well but never scores?
Interesting. The answer is yes, but it's relative to the team being successful and winning. Obviously, your job as a goal scorer is to score goals. You don't need me to tell you that, but I just did. The things that you are doing in a situation where you are not scoring goals then become much more important, in that you need to be directly contributing and directly connecting to others that are scoring goals. And as long as it's going well in that you are winning, that's great. But as soon as you are not winning, that's problematic, because you need that person, and not just you as a coach or not just you as a fan, but you as a player. You need to rely on that person up top, in that, I've always said it's not necessarily the amount of goals that you score, but how many games that you score in that there's nothing more valuable to me than walking on a field and knowing that because of the person that I have up top, for the most part, we are already winning 1-0. And that's what great goal scorers do. And so the problem will come is that if you say, all right, we're not doing well, and this guy or this girl is not scoring for us up top, and not contributing in terms of assists, or not contributing in terms of hold up or combination play or anything like that that's leading to us scoring, then we're going to find somebody else that will. The other problem is teams can be greedy. And if you say, well, we're winning and you're keeping your position, for example, for France, people point to Olivier Giroud, right? As a perfect example, and not scoring, and yet the team won a World Cup. The problem will be is that teams and coaches will get greedy, and they'll say, okay, we're doing this well, and our striker isn't even scoring. Think of how good we could be if we add that component. Now that's dangerous, because you might be changing up the mix, and that could be problematic. But that's the way that things think. So that's a long way answering your question is, yes, you can, but it's very, very dangerous. And there is a real balance that you have to achieve. And as soon as you are either perceived, or the reality is that you aren't contributing to other people scoring, or the team is not winning, I'll try to find somebody else.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was growing up, center forward's job was to score goals, and wingers were mostly providers. And there's been this phenomenon in the last 15, 20 years where those wide attacking players have become big-time goal scorers. And if you have that, then you have the luxury of maybe having a center forward that's more of a playmaking center forward. And a couple of examples of that, when Cristiano Ronaldo was at Real Madrid, scoring 50, 60 goals a season, cutting in from the left there, Karim Benzema sort of reinvented himself as more of a playmaking center forward. His goal scoring numbers went down, but nobody minded, because he was helping Ronaldo achieve his totals. And also Liverpool are set up in such a way where Salah and Mane are the big time goal scorers on that team. And Firmino functions as more of a playmaker. And so, yeah, it's possible. And also another thing that managers now are putting a lot of premium on is center forwards that can press well, like Gabriel Jesus at City. Is very streaky when it comes to the goals. And whenever he has these goal scoring droughts, people always question Pep, why are you still playing him? And the thing that Pep always brings up, he did it again recently, is he said, Gabriel Jesus is the best center forward in the world in terms of pressing the opposition and hounding defenders and teams that are trying to play out of the back. And he forces a lot of turnovers that lead to scoring chances for us. So he's still valuable even when he's not scoring because of that. So yeah, but the Giroud example you brought up is really the most polarizing of the last few years, because I've never viewed Olivier Giroud as that sort of playmaking center forward or guy that quote unquote does other things. I always viewed him as just a target forward, a guy that's judged ultimately by whether he scores goals or not. And so lo and behold, he starts 6 games for France at the World Cup, doesn't score a single goal. But France end up winning the World Cup anyway, and guys like Griezmann and Mbappe have good tournaments. So the tactics crowd really has gone out of its way to try to convince you that no, Giroud actually had a good tournament because he held up the ball well, and the way he occupies center backs, created space for others. And there are others that didn't buy that and felt like, nah, you're being generous. They won it in spite of him. So yeah, that's been sort of a raging debate the last couple of years. It's been kind of interesting. So yeah, it's an interesting
They
topic.
won it in spite of it. Oh, jeez, that is harsh. I don't know how you say harsh in French, but man, that is harsh. All right, what else, Mosse?
All right, this next one requires some context. So you recently were tweeting about which you consider to be the MLS super clubs, and you identified 5, I believe: the LA Galaxy, LAFC, Atlanta, Seattle, and Toronto, correct?
Yes.
And then you outlined what your criteria is. There were various categories. And Portland Timbers owner Merritt Paulson took exception to the Timbers not being on your list. And so he said, ask someone in South America or England to name an MLS team, and the Timbers are on any short list, ahead on several of your categories, top 5 in ratings, attendance, etc. I could give 2 craps about a super club listing. Not sure what the metric is other than the Alexi sniff test. And then he added an emoji of somebody with their hands up looking perplexed, indicative of him not knowing what you're talking about.
I love Merritt. I love that he wears his Portland on his sleeve. I love that he, as an owner of multiple teams, defends his teams, and in doing so defends what he has helped to build. But as I said, that he even felt the need to respond means that he was a little irked that his team was not included in my list. Obviously, my list is subjective. I've talked about super clubs all the way back to the turn of the century, if you will, and this desire, at least the way I looked at it, to create these teams that are bigger. And when I say bigger, that has a lot of different meanings, but ultimately teams that when you think about a league, those are the teams that you think about. And we have them in all sorts of leagues. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you are winning every single time, but your success, your relevance, your history, all of those different things can contribute. And you mentioned the 5 that I consider at this point to be those super clubs. Some of them have been around, like the Los Angeles Galaxy. Some of them are newer, like LAFC or Atlanta. And by the way, the other part of it is money, to be blunt, and the amount of money that you spend, or that you are continually perceived to be spending. When it comes to merit, can a small or smaller market type of city be a super club? I think they can. I think it's much harder to do that. And so, yes, the fact that a place like Los Angeles or a place like Atlanta or a place like Seattle, for that matter, lends itself much more to being a super club. Yeah, that's certainly the case. The big omission, and the glaring omission, is that I did not mention any team from the New York metropolitan area. And that's a problem. That's a problem for both the Red Bulls. That's a problem for NYCFC. And that's a problem for Major League Soccer, because of how important that market is to any business, including Major League Soccer. Now, look, Merritt can have his own list. You out there listening and watching can have your own list. But ultimately, when I talked about the Galaxy, and a lot of it was based on the signing of David Beckham and what that meant in changing the perception of the Galaxy, and that you could go to the other side of the earth and ask somebody, do you know an MLS team? And oftentimes they will say the Los Angeles Galaxy, because of the association with David Beckham. But that's what you're striving for. You're striving for that type of recognition, and therefore that type of relevance. And look, I'm not discounting the fact that if you go to Argentina, that you may run into people who are able to say the Portland Timbers. Okay. I just don't think that it's on the level of some of those other teams in terms of the recognition, or in terms of the way that we look at it, even internally here in the United States. Doesn't mean you can't be great. It doesn't mean you can't make a lot of money. It doesn't mean that I don't have respect for what you are doing. But it just means that the way that I see a super club, you're not there right now. And who knows, maybe you will be in the future. I mean, Columbus, the owners of Columbus weren't irritated that they weren't a super club. They're the champions of Major League Soccer. They got a new stadium opening. They have new ownership. They are kicking ass right now in Columbus. You certainly don't need my super club label to be relevant or to be successful. But I love you, Merritt, if you're listening. And as I said before, I love the fact that he is very, very open and public about his support. Look, if your owner doesn't take, I guess you can use the phrase ownership, if your owner doesn't take things personally, if your owner is not emotional about this team, then I think there is a problem. Yes, it is a business, absolutely. But I love the fact that there is a passion involved in the business that they are running. And that is personified in someone like Merritt Paulson. And it doesn't mean that other owners don't have that type of passion and emotion, but his is just very public. And whether it's on Twitter or just in general, he has obviously cultivated that type of image and wants to be out there and wants to be public. And I think it serves him well. And I think it serves Portland well, even when we disagree. So thank you, Merritt, for responding. You're still not a super club.
This next one also requires some context. So when Zach Steffen joined Manchester City, folks like you and Stu Holden questioned that decision on the basis that he wouldn't be playing regularly. And you added that if he wasn't playing regularly, he should not be the starter for the U.S. national team, that somebody like Brad Guzan should be the starter instead. Those comments generated a lot of controversy at the time. Steffen has gotten a run of games recently, in part because Ederson is dealing with COVID complications, and Steffen has done well to the point that after the last game, Pep Guardiola praised him and said that he can compete for the starting job. So a lot of your haters on Twitter took great joy in that. And this one guy, in reacting to Pep's comments about Zach Steffen, he tweeted at you and says, "Alexi Lalas still thinks Brad Guzan is our number one. You can't make this stuff up anymore about this guy." And then he added 2 emojis of somebody laughing at how ridiculous you are.
Right. So first off, I was never asked if I think that Brad Guzan is our number one right now. This was something from 6 months ago. It was absolutely appropriate, and I stand by it. And therefore, it was awesome, and it is awesome in terms of the take that I had at that point. If we were to have played a game, that Zach Steffen is playing right now, however it comes about, really it doesn't matter to me as long as he's on the field, is great. I would have no problem if today Greg Berhalter decided to start Zach Steffen in goal. No problem with that. I hope that this continues. I hope that he keeps playing, and I hope that in doing so, he opens eyes and hearts and minds of the decision makers over there that this is a viable option. Now, Pep came out and was great and very positive in saying that he believes that he can challenge for the number one, but ultimately the decision has to be made. And I still believe that whether it's Zach Steffen, and in particular Zach Steffen as a goalkeeper, he needs to be a place where he's playing. And I don't think that simply training at Man City is enough necessarily for him to start for this particular U.S. men's national team going forward. So look, if you like to say that you were somehow proven right by the fact that Zach Steffen has gotten starts because the number one goalkeeper is dealing with COVID issues, have at it. If it makes you feel better, go ahead. But at the point when myself and Stu and others were being asked the question, it was relative to, what if we have to play a game today? And at that point, with a Zach Steffen who it was not known whether he was going to play, and he certainly wasn't playing on a consistent basis. And that's where that ultimately came from. But if you feel that you need to find a way to gloat, to make yourself feel better, I am here for you. I am giving you that opportunity. I am giving of myself to make sure that you feel that you are vindicated and that I am pumping up the lack of self-esteem that you may or may not have. What else, Mosse?
I guess that leads directly into the next one. Normally we only do 3 Ask Alexis, but you requested this bonus one this week. I guess you have something you want to get off your chest. So even by your standards, the last few days were pretty tumultuous for you on Twitter between your Pulisic comments, your Super Club rankings, I guess folks dredging up this Steffen Guzan stuff. And so Andrew J. Chwalik, Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. He merely asked you, Alexi, real question. Why does it seem like everyone hates you? You would like to respond to this, gentlemen.
I probably should take responsibility if that's the perception that you have. I probably should be. It's partly because of the fact that oftentimes I tweet or retweet negative and or critical type of responses that I get for the sole reason that it oftentimes makes for better content. It's more interesting. There's a reason why the the reading of mean tweets resonates. Nobody wants to sit up there and watch somebody read glowing, nice, kind, complimentary types of tweets. So I do take some of that responsibility for doing that. Having said that, I also think that when it comes to Twitter, and I know I spend a lot of time on Twitter, and Twitter can be an echo chamber, and it's really, really not a great focus group. As a matter of fact, it oftentimes is a horrible focus group. But Twitter tells you that everybody hates me. And I amplify it. I will readily admit at times. The reality is that there is a lot of wonderful and positive and very, very kind things that people say to me, whether it's on Twitter and in person. There is, and it's much easier, and people are much more liable to take the time to say mean things than kind things out there. I don't doubt that there are those that despise me or, to use your word, hate me, but I also am confident and believe enough in my my goodness, shall we say, that the overwhelming, while they might not agree with me, and oftentimes don't, recognize that I like to respond in a civil and a respectable way, and I enjoy the opportunity to debate and to converse and to argue different sides when it comes to soccer, for the most part, which is what we often talk about here. But if that is the perception that you have, and you are concerned, fear not. I'm okay. I have an incredibly thick skin that I've amassed over the years, and that there are plenty of people out there that at least tolerate me, and I'll take that. Toleration is good. So I appreciate those that do, at the very least, tolerate me. And those that hate, it's still interesting that they continue to follow. All right, Mosse, anything else when it comes to our Ask Alexi?
No, that's it.
All right, we are going to take one more real quick break, and when we come back, I will have my one for the road. Don't go anywhere. Okay, we are back, and it's that time again, the end of the pod. And at the end of each pod, I give you my one for the road. Hell of a week here in the United States, and not one that will be looked at as our shining hour, shall we say. We don't talk about, for the most part, we don't talk a whole lot about politics or anything like that. But we are human beings. We live and function in this world and in this society and in this culture and in this country that I still feel is the greatest country in the world. Some of the things that we saw this week in our country were disgraceful and were wrong and should be condemned and are being condemned, rightfully so. When you attack and when you destroy and when you hurt and when you kill, regardless of what your beliefs, your ideology, or your politics, or anything like that, it's wrong. And it's wrong whether it's a mom and pop type of store in middle America, or if it's the capital of what I feel is the greatest country in the world. And it's sad. And look, I hope that 2021, as we said, gets better. But we also said that a week ago, and it went on from there. But you know, I do believe that as a country, we can get better, and that we will get better. And as a soccer community, we are, you know, part of this country, and we are, like our country, we are incredibly diverse, and we think about things differently. And as I say time and time again, we agree and we disagree. But you know, our ability to do it in a civil and respectful type of manner is ultimately what the foundation of this country is built on, and hopefully what it continued to be built on. And you know, I was in the process of moving some stuff this week, and I found all of this old soccer stuff, old magazines and old clippings. And you know, it's amazing to me to go and to read through some of these things and to see how, you know, the problems that we face today, both as a country and actually as a soccer culture, you know, many of them existed in different ways and in different forms, but still for the most part existed as I was reading through the different things that I saw. But I also saw, you know, the incredible growth and the incredible culture that is American soccer right before my eyes, because these were magazines, like I said, and newspapers and different things that I had just collected over the years that were a timeline and showed the growth and the evolution of this sport that we know and love. And I remain incredibly proud of what we have become as a soccer playing nation. And despite what's happened over the course of the last week, I still remain incredibly proud of who we are and who we can be going forward. But it doesn't happen without the ability to be respectful and to be civil and to be kind and to have a no asshole policy, if you will. And you know, that's not a partisan type of take. That's just, you know, ultimately how I think a lot of people feel. And so here's to hopefully better days ahead, whether it's the next week, whether it's the next year, whether it's the next 10 years, both as a soccer playing and a soccer loving culture and as a country. So, as I said, I don't want to bring everybody down or anything like that when it comes to things that we talk about. This is a soccer podcast, but I know it's been on everybody's mind. It's what everybody has talked about, and you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention it. We don't have our heads in the sands, and we don't ignore things, but we also don't dive into a lot of the stuff. And part of it is out of respect for the fact that, you know, you're coming to this pod for a little bit of escape. And if you've already turned off, I understand, I get it. If you haven't, just recognize and please respect that it was just in an effort to recognize that we are soccer people, but we are humans, and for the most part, you know, we are, many of us, Americans, and we have different beliefs, but we ultimately want this country to succeed, and it can, and I think that it will. All right, Mosse, anything that you'd like to say before we move on?
No, I think we can end on that note.
We will talk again next week. Once again, apologies that we had to put this off. As you found out at the top of the show, this was all David Mosse's doing and fault, and so you can send your critiques and your criticisms to him. But I guess it could not be helped. And we will be back hopefully next week doing it at the right time. But you never know. You never know what can get in our way. Mosse, anything before we go?
Well, actually, we do have a U.S. women's national team game on Monday. So next week.
I didn't want to bring it up, but I didn't want to bring it up right now. But yes, we do. The good news is that we do have a U.S. women's national team game. And I couldn't be more excited to see a U.S. team play. And obviously the U.S. women's national team, which is coming back and getting ready, hopefully, fingers crossed, although we never know, for an Olympic appearance this summer. And you got folks like Megan Rapinoe and Carly Lloyd potentially being part of that 18-person roster. And so we'll find out a little bit more about that. We'll see if that changes the way that we ultimately record and when we record. Hopefully it doesn't. But if it does, please bear with us and I guess preemptive apologies if it does. All right, we'll talk again next week. Please continue to download and to rate and subscribe and do all the things that you do. We love you for it, and we thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us each and every week. All right, as always, size the day. You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.